The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground as Lieutenant Zara Kellerman adjusted her uniform for the third time. At barely 23, with her slight frame and youthful face, she had grown accustomed to the sideways glances and whispered comments from the other officers. Staff Sergeant Reynolds emerged from the briefing tent, his weathered face creased in familiar disdain as he spotted her near the equipment roster. "You still here, rookie?" he called out loud enough for the gathered personnel to hear. "Shouldn't you be filing paperwork somewhere safe?" The laughter that followed felt like needles against her skin, but Zara maintained her composure, straightening her shoulders as she had been taught years ago in a different place, under different circumstances. Corporal Martinez joined the growing circle, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Maybe we should find her something more suitable, like inventory duty. Can't have the fresh meat getting in the way of real operations." Before we continue with this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe military families are common in your area, or perhaps you've witnessed someone being underestimated because of their appearance. The words stung because they echoed doubts she had carried for months, but beneath the surface, something else stirred. Something these men could never imagine. The mess hall buzzed with the usual morning chatter as Zara carried her tray to an empty table near the window. The clatter of utensils against metal trays created a familiar rhythm that reminded her of countless other military installations she had known. Captain Brooks slid into the seat across from her without invitation, his expression mixing curiosity with barely concealed amusement. "So tell me, Kellerman," he said between bites of scrambled eggs, "what exactly qualified you for this assignment? Your file seems remarkably thin for someone requesting active duty placement." The question carried an edge that made nearby conversations pause, heads turning toward their table with undisguised interest. Zara met his gaze steadily, her voice calm despite the attention focused on them. "I go where I'm needed, sir." The response seemed to amuse Brooks further, his laugh sharp enough to cut through the ambient noise of the crowded hall. Major Thompson appeared beside their table, his massive frame casting a shadow across the surface. "That's rich," he said, his voice carrying the authority of years in command. "A desk jockey thinking she belongs with combat veterans. Maybe you should reconsider your career path before someone gets hurt because of your inexperience." The words hung in the air like smoke, drawing more spectators to witness what felt like a public execution of her credibility. Yet something deep within her remained unshaken, a foundation built on experiences these men would never comprehend. The afternoon briefing room felt stifling as Colonel Harrison outlined the upcoming training exercises. Zara sat in the back row, acutely aware of the empty seats surrounding her like a buffer zone. The other officers had made their feelings clear through subtle but deliberate isolation, leaving her to occupy a corner that felt more like quarantine than seating arrangement. Lieutenant Colonel Pierce leaned back in his chair, his voice cutting through the colonel's presentation. "Sir, with respect, should we really be including untested personnel in tomorrow's tactical simulation?" His eyes found Zara with predatory precision. Some operations require proven experience, not theoretical knowledge from whatever academy produced this one. The room shifted uncomfortably, but no one came to her defense. Colonel Harrison paused his briefing, his weathered face showing mild irritation at the interruption. "The roster has already been finalized, Pierce. Everyone present will participate according to their assigned roles." Sergeant Williams chose that moment to add his voice to the growing chorus of doubt. "Hope she can keep up, sir. Would hate for the exercise to fail because someone freezes under pressure." The comment drew subtle nods of agreement from several corners of the room, creating an atmosphere thick with skepticism. Zara remained motionless, her hands folded calmly in her lap while something ancient and unbreakable stirred within her chest, waiting for the right moment to surface. Dawn broke gray and cold over the training grounds as Zara checked her equipment with methodical precision. The other officers gathered in clusters, their voices carrying across the field in harsh whispers that she pretended not to hear. Captain Rodriguez approached with his usual swagger, his combat gear gleaming with the polish of someone who spent more time maintaining appearances than earning them. "Look at that," he announced to his assembled followers. "She's actually going through with it. Think she'll last 10 minutes before calling for extraction." The group erupted in laughter that felt designed to break her concentration, but Zara continued her preparations without acknowledging their presence. Major Hendricks stepped closer, his voice dropping to what he probably considered a helpful tone. "It's not too late to bow out gracefully, Kellerman. No shame in admitting this isn't your level. Better to step aside now than compromise the entire operation when things get difficult." The concerned facade barely masked his obvious desire to see her fail publicly. Around them, other personnel began final preparations for what promised to be an intensive day of tactical scenarios designed to test every aspect of their military training and leadership capabilities. Zara shouldered her pack with movements that spoke of muscle memory earned through experiences none of these men could fathom, her silence more profound than any response she might have offered to their persistent provocations. The first tactical scenario thrust them into simulated urban combat, with concrete barriers and smoke grenades creating chaos across the training field. Zara found herself assigned to the most dangerous position, a forward reconnaissance role that everyone assumed would overwhelm her inexperience. Captain Stevens radioed from his command position with barely concealed satisfaction in his voice. "Kellerman, maintain visual contact with the enemy positions, but don't engage without explicit orders. We can't afford amateur mistakes, compromising our advance." The dismissive tone suggested he expected her to crack under the pressure of coordinated enemy fire and complex battlefield dynamics. As simulated rounds whistled overhead, Zara moved through the obstacles with fluid precision that surprised the spotters tracking her progress. Her navigation of the kill zone showed an understanding of battlefield geometry that seemed impossible for someone with her supposed limited experience in actual combat situations. Lieutenant Baker's voice crackled through the radio with growing concern. "Sir, she's positioning herself in a tactically superior location. That movement pattern suggests advanced training beyond basic officer school." The observation carried a note of confusion that rippled through the command structure monitoring the exercise. Zara remained focused on her assigned sector, but her eyes held the calculating sharpness of someone who had navigated far deadlier battlefields under circumstances these officers could never imagine or fully comprehend. The second wave of the exercise intensified as enemy forces flanked their position, forcing rapid tactical adjustments under simulated artillery fire. Major Collins watched through binoculars from the observation tower, his confidence wavering as Zara anticipated enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. Her radio calls demonstrated strategic thinking that belonged in advanced command courses, not basic field operations. "She's predicting their assault patterns before they execute them," Collins muttered to his aide, confusion evident in his voice. That level of battlefield intuition typically requires years of combat experience and specialized intelligence training. On the field, Zara coordinated defensive positions with subtle hand signals that the other officers struggled to follow. Her understanding of enemy psychology and tactical doctrine seemed to flow from some deeper well of knowledge that contradicted everything they thought they knew about her background and qualifications. Sergeant Torres found himself following her lead instinctively, despite his earlier skepticism about her abilities. "Ma'am, your positioning saved us from that flanking maneuver. How did you know they would approach from that vector?" The question hung in the air as other team members began to notice the growing disparity between her supposed inexperience and her demonstrated expertise. Zara maintained operational focus, while something profound shifted in the dynamics around her, the first cracks appearing in their collective assumption about who she really was. The final phase of the exercise erupted into chaos as multiple enemy units converged on their positions simultaneously. Colonel Harrison observed from the command center, his weathered face growing increasingly perplexed as Zara seamlessly transitioned from defensive tactics to coordinated counteroffensive maneuvers that required years of specialized training to execute properly. She's running a textbook multi-vector assault coordination, he told his staff officers, who exchanged uncertain glances. That's advanced warfare college material, not something you learn in basic officer training programs. Below them, Zara directed fire teams with precision that transformed their scattered defensive position into a coordinated killing machine. Her voice carried an authority that made seasoned veterans respond instantly, despite their earlier dismissive attitudes toward her supposed inexperience and questionable qualifications. Captain Williams found himself taking orders from her without question, his previous skepticism replaced by grudging respect for her tactical brilliance. "How does she know enemy doctrine better than our intelligence briefings?" he whispered to Lieutenant Hayes, who could only shake his head in bewilderment. The transformation was undeniable now, but none of them understood how a young officer with supposedly limited experience could demonstrate mastery that belonged in elite special operations units. Zara continued her coordination as if unaware of the profound shift occurring in their perception of her true capabilities and mysterious background. The exercise concluded with overwhelming success, but an uncomfortable silence settled over the assembled officers as they processed what they had witnessed. Major Thompson stood near the equipment depot, his earlier confidence replaced by visible confusion as he watched Zara methodically clean her rifle with movements that spoke of countless hours in far more dangerous places than training grounds. "Sir," Sergeant Martinez approached Colonel Harrison with obvious reluctance. "We need to discuss Lieutenant Kellerman's performance. Her tactical knowledge exceeds anything in her personnel file." The concern in his voice reflected the growing unease spreading through the ranks like wildfire. Colonel Harrison nodded grimly, his own suspicions crystallizing into unavoidable questions that demanded immediate answers. "Her service record shows standard officer training, but what we observe today suggests specialized operations experience at the highest levels of military classification." Lieutenant Porter joined the growing circle of confused officers, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried undertones of genuine fear. That level of battlefield command presence doesn't develop overnight. Either her file is incomplete, or we're dealing with someone operating under deep cover for reasons we don't understand. The weight of their collective realization hung heavy in the air as they began to grasp that everything they thought they knew about Zara Kellerman was fundamentally wrong, and the truth might be more significant than any of them had prepared themselves to handle. Evening approached as the officers gathered for debriefing, their earlier mockery replaced by tense whispers and sideways glances toward Zara, who sat apart reviewing tactical maps with the focused intensity of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. Captain Brooks cleared his throat nervously, his previous arrogance crumbling under the weight of unexplained contradictions. "Colonel, we need clarification about Lieutenant Kellerman's actual background," he said, his voice lacking its usual commanding edge. "Today's performance suggests training and experience that don't match any standard career progression we understand." The other officers nodded in agreement, their collective confusion creating an atmosphere thick with unspoken questions and growing apprehension about the true identity of the woman they had dismissed so casually just hours earlier. Major Collins stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concern that bordered on genuine worry. "Sir, with respect, that wasn't the performance of a junior officer. We're talking about tactical expertise that requires security clearances and operational experience at levels far above what her rank should indicate." Colonel Harrison studied the assembled group, recognizing that the situation had reached a breaking point where answers could no longer be delayed or deflected. The truth would have to emerge, regardless of the consequences for everyone involved in this increasingly complex and potentially embarrassing misunderstanding. The tension shattered like glass when the briefing room door opened with sharp authority, revealing General Morrison's imposing figure silhouetted against the corridor lights. His 3 stars gleamed under the fluorescent bulbs as every officer in the room snapped to attention with mechanical precision, their previous confusion momentarily displaced by ingrained military protocol and respect for supreme command authority. At ease, gentlemen, the general commanded, his voice carrying the weight of decades in uniform and countless battlefields. His steel-gray eyes swept across the assembled officers before settling on Zara with unmistakable recognition that sent shockwaves through the room. Colonel Harrison stepped forward with visible nervousness, his voice carefully measured as he addressed his superior. "Sir, we have some questions regarding Lieutenant Kellerman's background and qualifications that emerged during today's tactical exercises and performance evaluations." General Morrison's weathered face remained impassive as he studied the group of confused officers, his silence stretching like a taut wire before he spoke with deliberate precision that commanded absolute attention from everyone present. "I see there's been some confusion about Lieutenant Kellerman's status," he said, his tone suggesting that the confusion was about to be resolved in a manner that would fundamentally alter every assumption these officers had made about the young woman standing quietly in their midst. General Morrison's eyes held a mixture of amusement and stern disapproval as he surveyed the room of increasingly uncomfortable officers. Lieutenant Kellerman is operating under special assignment protocols that require her to maintain cover while conducting operational assessments of unit readiness and leadership effectiveness across multiple installations. The words hit the assembled group like artillery rounds, each revelation reshaping their understanding of the past weeks with devastating clarity. Captain Brooks felt his face drain of color as the implications of his treatment toward her became horrifyingly apparent. Furthermore, the general continued with relentless precision. "What you gentlemen have been calling Lieutenant Kellerman is actually Colonel Kellerman, decorated veteran of 3 combat deployments and recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross for extraordinary heroism under enemy fire in classified operations." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of Major Thompson's sharp intake of breath as he realized the magnitude of their collective error. Every dismissive comment, every condescending order, every moment of disrespect had been directed toward a superior officer whose actual rank and experience dwarfed their own. Colonel Harrison's face went ashen as he understood that his unit had not only failed the assessment, but had demonstrated precisely the kind of prejudicial leadership failures that warranted immediate corrective action from the highest levels of military command. The transformation was immediate and profound as every officer in the room straightened with newfound respect, their previous arrogance replaced by the sobering reality of their misjudgment. Colonel Zara Kellerman rose from her seat with the quiet dignity of someone who had endured their prejudice while maintaining her mission integrity and professional composure. General Morrison's voice carried final authority as he addressed the assembled group. "Colonel Kellerman's assessment will determine the future leadership structure of this installation. Your performance during her evaluation period has been thoroughly documented and will influence upcoming promotion decisions and unit assignments." Captain Brooks stepped forward with visible shame, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ma'am, Colonel, we owe you our sincerest apologies for our unprofessional conduct and failure to recognize your authority." The words felt inadequate against the weight of their collective failure. Colonel Kellerman's response carried the grace of true leadership tempered by hard-earned wisdom. "The best apology is improved performance and genuine commitment to treating all personnel with the respect their service deserves, regardless of appearances or assumptions about their background." The room fell silent as the officers absorbed the lesson that would reshape their approach to leadership and judgment. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment or character, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength when others underestimated them. Sometimes the most powerful people are the ones we least expect.